Hello. I want to take a minute to demystify some of the OSR principles. It's been a topic that has seen a lot of discussion of late, and I thought I would just throw my hat in the ring in terms of offering a perspective. I'm not going to cover them all at once. I'm going to go one at a time, but I just would like to point out as an overview that when you read the Principia Apocrypha or other OSR manifestos or documents that are purporting to show the philosophy, remember that these were written well after the original rules. That is not to say that there have not been some games in the OSR space that have taken those principles from the beginning and tried to build a game around them, but for the most part, the principles and manifestos are written looking back at pre-existing games, and really, at least my belief, is in an aspirational way, looking at these games and asking questions such as, what do we really like about those games, and why do we really like them, and then building up a philosophy from there. Okay, the first principle, the principle that I'm going to cover in this video, is the combat as a fail state principle. The reason why I picked this one is it's probably the one that I think if you were someone who played D&D back in the day, or you're someone who never stopped playing the old school style D&D, and then you read that, it's the one that might be the most kind of eyebrow raising, or might need you to say, huh? I don't remember that. And it's because it's saying something that seems to be, in many ways, the inverse of our experience, those of us who played back in the day. We were playing back in the day, we weren't avoiding combat like the plague. We weren't running away from combat. In fact, combat was very much a part of the game. Usually something that we were trying to do, especially me playing as a young person. We were not trying to avoid combat. We certainly didn't look at combat as a failed state. So, what do they mean by this? Well, I'm going to give you my point of view, and you can take it or leave it. Obviously, I can't speak for the original authors of these manifestos and philosophies. And I'm going to give you a very recent example. I've been playing in Daniel's home game. Daniel, aka Bandit Keep, runs his game here in New York City. I'm a player in his game. I'm going to use the example of how we play to illustrate what I think is meant by this particular philosophical statement. In his game, we were traveling through this underworld location. This underworld is basically a conduit from one place to another. It's like a maze. You can learn paths through, but of course there are dangers down there. You are not alone. Now, where we are going, I believe we intend to, or we anticipate, fighting stuff. We are moving to a location. We're trying to take the shortcut to get there sooner rather than later, and we know that when we reach that location, either we will want to engage things in combat or we will have to engage things in combat. But that's our choice. But to get there, we need to go through this underworld area. Now, going through this underworld area, we are trying not to fight anything. Because, why? Well, because we want all our resources for the fights that we know will come on the other side. So fighting things here, it's not part of our plans. Anything we fight here, even if it were to give us some treasure, it's probably going to cost us more than we will gain. So we are trying to avoid them. Now, there were, I think, and we're not totally through with it, but in that session, I believe there were 4 encounters. We only had one combat. This is intentional on our part. The one combat we had was the one that we could not avoid, and we tried hard to avoid it. The first 2 we were able to conduct business with, use diplomatic means. Great, so we were able to bypass those. We did not look to fight the people that we found down there, and when we were able to converse with them and find common ground and actually do commerce with, we did. The third encounter was the one that we actually fought. However, we tried to move around it, we tried to avoid it, but what we ran into is apparently there were 2 of them, and they were hydras. So we found one hydra blocking our way, tried to get around to the other side. We were able to, but then we realized we had to backtrack. We could not quite draw out that hydra where we needed to be so that we could make a run around it. And then another hydra showed up that sort of penned us in. We tried moving around. We tried to get kind of behind it and sneak through. That was unsuccessful. So what do we have to do? Well, we had to fight it, and we were lucky enough that we were able to kill it very efficiently without using any resources, without incurring any damage, and we made our way on. what I'm telling out this big example to show is that in our case, that last combat, in a sense, was a fail state. We were trying to avoid combat, and the only reason we fought that Hydra is because we had no other choice. We failed in going around it the way we were attempting to. So yes, in that sense, that one was a fail state. However, that doesn't mean that combat overall is a fail state, because there are many times in this game or in other games that combat's required. You're going to have to fight stuff. And if you look at the earliest modules, and I'll just take the BX era ones, or at Isle of Dread, or Keep on the Borderlands, maybe there's some way that you could get all the way through without fighting anything, but I doubt it. The key is that you want to fight the things that you want to fight, and you want to fight them on the terms that you set, not on the terms that it sets. So if you can avoid wandering creatures, or creatures that aren't going to have treasure, or creatures that are just kind of in the way for where you really want to get to, you probably want to do that, because when you get to the place you're trying to get to, you probably are going to have to fight stuff, and you may not have had the ability to rest and recover, get the resources back, get your hit points back. All that stuff you may have, you don't want to use if you have scrolls or wands with limited charges. You want to use the least amount of them you can until you need them. So don't fight them. Don't get around them. Move around. Talk. Evade. And hopefully not get surprised, because that can be the death knell. Because then not only does that limit your options of what you can do, but it generally puts the monsters right up in your face. That's what they mean by combat is a fail state. But by saying it so generally, it can give off the idea that you're just not supposed to fight anything ever. And if you ever do, then you have failed. That's not what... I don't think that's what they mean. I understand why they say it in the way they do, because by saying it like that, it's very simple, and it has a lot of power. It is a powerful statement that makes you rethink why you're fighting things, and that, I think, is the key. When you're playing these games, you really want to think about, why am I fighting this? What am I gaining? What am I losing? Now, the Hydra has the potential to have a pretty good horde behind it if we get it in its lair, which I think was maybe a 30% chance or 20% chance, somewhere in there, and we didn't strike the lottery on getting the lair. So when you look at that monster, you maybe think, yes, I do want to fight this, because I do believe there might be something in its hoard of treasure that might be useful to me. But we found out as well, it wasn't. It had nothing for us. And if we had incurred damages, if we had suffered injuries, if we had used spells that we wouldn't have a chance to recharge when we got outside, then it really wouldn't have been worth it. And doing that calculus, doing that math in our head, we said, you know what, we just want to get through. So let's get around it. In our case, we couldn't. We had to fight it. So in that sense, we failed. But there are combats that we are gunning for, and combats we've had in the past that were absolutely not a failsafe. That's what we were there to do exactly. I hope that makes sense. If you have a principle or one of these philosophies that you'd like me to cover in particular, if I don't get around to it, let me know. What do you think about that particular maxim? Do you agree with it, disagree with it? Do you have a different take than I do? Let me know. Other than that, folks, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.